Good morning. Thank you. I would first like to thank the organizers and Professor Girard for the invitation and for the organization of this event. So, I will talk about the need to believe and how it's important in times of uncertainty. So the need to believe has not been systematically addressed in the history of philosophical ideas. Philosophers and theologians have themselves more often thematized the desire of God. In my presentation, I will explore different approaches to the need to believe through the lenses of philosophers and thinkers of some disciplines. So, trying to answer the questions: do we need to believe, and how is this need deepened by insecurity, fear, war, and social instability? So, the philosophy of religion is a discipline that inspires and delimits my presentation. The need to believe has been the subject of several philosophical approaches expressed in various ways. Since Augustine of Hippo, we have been rediscovering the idea of the inevitability of believing. He writes in De Utilitate Credendi that from birth, human beings naturally believe that their parents are indeed their own, and vice versa. He says, yet we believe, and without the slightest hesitation, while acknowledging that we cannot know. Human beings accept truth without recourse to scientific proof. This means that believing is, in a way, necessary for human beings to act and live. Believing is the foundation of human beings' relationships. The same is true for the belief in a doctrine that precedes knowledge. In the Confessions, Augustine asserts that we are obliged to believe in what was not demonstrated, because without believing, one would do absolutely nothing in his life. Therefore, without belief, even understanding is not possible. Thus, every human being believes without understanding, and if man believed only what is obvious and graspable, no human society could survive without them. These are the words of Augustine. Belief is necessary for human relations and for the construction of society. So Augustine notes the obligation to believe in what we do not understand, and from the fact that belief precedes understanding, we can deduce that human being needs to believe in order to understand, and that he needs to believe more than he needs to understand. Maurice Blondel wrote in 1930 in La Revue de Métaphysique et de Morale that not only do we need a balance between the concepts of faith and reason, but also that belief and reason are valued at the same level. He writes, what we already partially know remains an object of faith, indefinitely capable of enrichment. In other words, the object that we can apprehend through intelligence is not limited. It becomes an object of belief, which it needs that belief in order to continue being thought. Knowledge, which obviously takes place by means of reason and requires belief. Knowledge is never fulfilled without belief. This leads to the desire for a manifestation, for a revelation, or the metaphysical desire, the desire for the divine. Blondel interprets Augustine, insisting on the importance of belief for knowledge and intelligence. I would like to note here that this idea also has been interpreted by Kant in the 18th century. Thomas Aquinas also describes belief as necessary, approaching it from a spiritual and religious perspective. So he writes in the Summa Theologica, it is necessary to believe what is in the realm of faith. Also, in the words of Thomas, what is most necessary for human being is to believe, according to the word Hebrew 11:6. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. So for him, believing is vital, and to believe in God has been necessary for man's survival since the beginning. So the grace to believe is inscribed in the heart of human being before he becomes aware or tries to know the reason for his existence. Thomas Aquinas defines the necessary as that without which a thing cannot exist. This definition brings necessity closer to the concept of need. If believing is necessary for man, according to the theologian and philosopher, then believing would be a need. Thomas Aquinas is not the only one to link the need to believe to a spiritual content. Blaise Pascal also affirmed that believing has an essentially spiritual meaning. Man's search for the sacred depends on God's grace. You would not seek me if you did not possess me. Console yourself, you would be looking for me if you hadn't found me. So the search for meaning or the object of belief would follow the fact that a human being has found or possessed God. This indicates that he has an intuitive knowledge of God deep within his heart and actively seeks him outwardly. The need to seek God and therefore to believe in him arises after the intuition we have of him and comes from the grace we have been given to desire him. To sum up, Augustine affirmed that believing is essential to life and intelligence. Thomas Aquinas considered it as a necessity. Pascal, for his part, finds that grace precedes believing. This is a rather spiritual theology of belief, philosophical and spiritual, though deduced from practical and logical arguments. The importance of faith belief, or belief in, not belief that, in the fact that faith precedes any action of seeking God or any act of belief and gives meaning to life. Believing is a necessity. This concept is associated with the idea of an indispensable need without which we cannot exist. For Michel de Certeau, believing immediately raises the question of the other, this other in whose word we believe and with whom we communicate from an early age. This is a citation from Michel de Certeau. From the beginning, a first word is only possible for the child because a respondent is waiting for him. So if believing is linked to the other, does that mean it is a vital need? How do psychologists consider belief? Sigmund Freud based his theory of belief on the need for the father at the dawn of the 20th century, interpreting the unconscious. He equated belief with neurosis in relation to the unconscious, which constitute the basis of his methodology. In Totem und Taboo, Freud argues that in primitive societies, from childhood, the human being adopts an ambivalent affective attitude towards his father. He loves him, he needs his protection and his love, but at the same time, the father is his rival, because he has taken his mother from him. As a result, the father must be eliminated in this sense. The father is a totem, an enemy to be defeated, while being adored. Feelings of love and hatred toward the father are taboo and repressed as such in the unconscious. This gesture of repression persists in adult life. The human being is still unable to detach himself psychically from his mother and continues to feel guilty for feeling hatred towards his father. According to Freud, this profile is that of a divinity. So he writes in Die Zukunft einer Illusion, the divinity represents the projection of the father that a human being needs, a protective and powerful father in this world, but also a rival whose death is he desires. Human being that thus attributes to the forces of nature the characteristics of the father, he turns them into gods. People implore the divine for the control of the phenomena of nature and at the same time desire his death. While adoring it, they feel a guilt they keep in their unconscious, and this guilt is inherited from previous generations. So Freud criticized religion by comparing it to an infantile neurosis or by calling it the universal obsessive neurosis of humanity. He demonstrated that fear and danger are at the root of religious belief. He proved in his own way the religious need to believe, especially in times of distress. So on the one hand, it's an answer to human beings' existential question, and on the other, it's the whole of the society that seeks to absolve itself of guilt before God and to compensate for its sins through religion and religious practice. So this was the slide for what I already said. So Sigmund Freud develops his reflections on the unconscious dimension of the human being relationship with parental figures in order to highlight the similarities between the totem, the father, and the divinity. And he offers a psychological analysis of the need to believe and reduces it to a need for ambivalent emotion dependence. This escape from reality is merely an illusory solution adopted by human beings in order to avoid confronting their solitude, their suffering, and the mystery of life. So now I will comment on Freud's theory. According to Antoine Bergot, a French philosopher and psychologist, Freud bases his argument on the distress that awakens in man the magical belief in an all-powerful father who compensates for human powerlessness. Because it's easier for human beings to rely on the consolations of the afterlife than to confront immediate reality. Religion is thus rendered illusory, even inauthentic, its origin lying in frustration and such as the absence of an answer to a human need in the face of material difficulties, expectation of supernatural help in moral struggles and emotional trials, and the anxiety of death in times of war or in the decline of life. According to Bergot, these same motives are ambivalent and also contain within themselves the seeds of unbelief and skepticism. So this is how Bergot comment and answer Freud. This is the most important part of the sentence. So I can repeat it if you want. So Bergot he said that these same motives, the motives for believing, are ambivalent and also contain within themselves the seeds of unbelief or skepticism. Despite the validity of Freud's thesis, belief cannot be reduced only the motivations he develops. So these motivations may constitute the origin of the emergence of a religious belief without, however, being its actual cause. Motivated religion transcends its own motivation. In the same vein, also the French psychoanalyst Sophie de Nijola-Mellor, the author of Le besoin de savoir and Le besoin de croire, métapsychologie du fait religieux, writes in the letter that nostalgic experience cannot summarize entirely the entirety of religious belief, but that it is nevertheless necessary for initiating the process of belief, whatever its content may be. In other words, if the need to be protected is the cause of a religious belief, the latter, the religious belief, nevertheless remains beyond its original motivation and surpasses its primary needs. This transition from psychological motivation to religious belief and maybe later to religious faith, to a faith. In Lebanon, the war, which has not completely stopped for more than 40 years, the economic instability, inflation, the devaluation of the Lebanese lira, and the explosion in the port of Beirut illustrate an insecurity deeply felt by the population. Unable to project themselves serenely into the future, a large part of the people live in constant fear of losing everything. To believe, or believing, appears then as a response to existential anguish and human distress. It never disappears, but its content evolves according to historical and social context. Thus, religion responds to this quest for meaning by satisfying. Religion responds to this quest by satisfying the need to believe. Human beings manage to give meaning to what a priori seems to be devoid of it. Why, in times of uncertainty, does a community have more need to believe? Marcel Gaucher writes in The Disenchantment of the World, so just a small, I don't want to be late on this, I will just pick two quick quotes of, small quotes of two sociologists. So he writes in The Disenchantment of the World, A Political History of Religion, that when the role of religion in society becomes negligible, human being becomes psychically exhausted by tirelessly asking themselves. So what are human beings are going to ask themselves? It's something that we ask every day in Lebanon. Why me? Why be born now when no one was expecting me? What do they want from me? What to do with my life when I'm the only one to decide it? Will I ever be like the others as Lebanese or others as individuals? Why does this illness, accident, abandonment fall on me? What is the point of having lived if you have to disappear without a trace, as if in the eyes of others you had not lived? These existential questions tore human being apart, especially in moments of distress. The other sociologist, Émile Durkheim, French, so both are French, but I have other sociologists, I cannot now be long. So on the social aspect of the importance of belief, he writes that there can be no society that does not feel the need to maintain and strengthen at regular intervals the collective feelings and collective ideas that make up its unity and its personality. No society can therefore exist unless it is united by the behaviors, beliefs, and aspirations of its members. In summary, this overview highlights thinkers who have explored the concept of belief. Clearly, other thinkers described how humans cling to intangible worlds beyond reality to find satisfactions that the material worlds cannot provide. Neuroscientists research, including brain MRI experiments, has also shown the satisfaction and comfort derived from belief. Ultimately, I conclude that belief is not only necessary, but the human need to believe is amplified by periods of uncertainty and instability, serving both existential and social functions. Thank you for listening.